Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so yeah, for the couple folks that are in here, we'll just briefly cover some of these beginner topics. As I mentioned, beginner topics can mean something different for everyone. So even if you're maybe past a beginner, maybe there's something we're covering here that you've never seen before, or just refreshing you on something. And if you are a beginner, I hope these do feel beginner-ish for you, and we're not just going too fast right off the get-go here. So first, we'll just chat about the topics here. So service accounts, I will hopefully convince you to administer service accounts for pipeline ownership as opposed to individual users. We'll chat about date time formatting inside of pipelines using a couple of Jinja filters because date time values can be tricky or pesky, even just Quickbase to Quickbase. We'll chat a little bit about different data types. I'm sure with all of the data that you see a variety of data types from text to numeric, int, float, date, time, email, users. So we're just going to talk about text and numeric to begin with. And then, maybe down the line, that we'll expand this into more data types than just those two. And then lastly, this one's my favorite, and it might be the least beginner of the beginner topics, but maybe it's a good segue into kind of the next step for you, which is handling null and blank values. And this is mostly when you are receiving data from an outside platform or source, and some of the data in there is null or blank, and you may not be expecting that. But I know for sure Quickbase is not expecting that. And we need to help Quickbase handle that because you can't just put nothing into a Quickbase field without formatting it. So we will talk about a cool filter called default and how that can help you handle null or blank values within different data types as well. So let's get cooking here. First off, service accounts, we're not going to jump into a pipeline or anything. There's nothing really to look at. We do have a help article that covers service accounts, but really I just kind of want to give you a quick briefing on what a service account is and why it's so valuable. An analogy I like to use is if you think about if you're part of a team and you have a shared um, Outlook inbox, it's kind of the same scenario with service accounts, right? It removes a single point of failure. If there's emails coming in to just one user, but multiple people need to have access to that, we would probably want like a shared or delegated inbox. Well, same with pipelines. We don't want one single person owning a pipeline. If that person's on vacation and the pipeline starts to fail, if that person has left the company, and their user has been deactivated or denied, the pipeline's not going to work. And so we want to remove that and have a service account own it so that multiple people can access those pipelines, again, if they're failing or someone has left the company. So that's the second point is it's very strong from a collaboration standpoint. It's not just pipelines, especially business critical ones, hidden behind the curtain somewhere. This is an account that multiple people who are assigned to it can access to either build new pipelines, add to existing pipelines, troubleshoot erroring ones, etc. Um, and the last point here is if you don't create a service account from the get-go and a bunch of individual users are creating pipelines that are business critical, and then you decide to implement a service account, you would have to migrate the pipelines from that one or multiple users into the service account. And it is possible. We do have a way of doing that, but it can be pretty cumbersome and it can be pretty tedious. And it just requires a lot of planning because you'll have to, copy and migrate the pipelines, turn off the ones in the old account, turn new ones on in the service account, and it just becomes a mess that can be avoided if you implemented service accounts from the get-go. So my spiel on service accounts is do it as early in the pipeline building process as you can. It will allow for collaboration. It will prevent single points of failure. It will prevent business critical pipelines coming to a screeching halt if somebody leaves the company. And then it will prevent you from needing to migrate pipelines. And we're talking potentially dozens or hundreds of pipelines, depending on who own those. Any questions on service accounts? Be like, Dwight, you are probably A-OK on service accounts. Okay, we'll jump into number 2 here, which is date and time formatting. And we'll jump into a little pipeline here. So I've got a couple steps here. One is a create record step, and one is a make request. They're just two different ways where you can create records in Quickbase. We'll be using the exact same filter in Jinja, so I'll just show you how it's set in both of them. Zoom in here a little bit. So we've got our little create record step here. We're just filling out a required field and a date time, and you can see this long string in here, which I will toss into the chat. And what this allows you to do is to take a date and time value, whether it's from Quickbase, whether it's a string value from an outside platform, and allows you to convert and transform it into something that a Quickbase date time field will accept. So I'm just using time.now. There are many ways where you can receive a date time value. And I'm converting it to the time zone of US Pacific using the time zone expression here, or filter. And there are many different ones. You could do US Mountain if you wanted to. The point of doing this in my use cases is to convert the date time that you're getting to match the time zone of the app, because by default, what you're getting in pipelines is based on UTC. And so you might get you might get a date time value and you write it into Quickbase, and then all of a sudden it like looks 8 hours in the future or something, because it retained its UTC time zone, and we want to convert it to the other data, match it with the other data in the app. And then the second filter being used here is string formatted time, strf time. And this allows you to use these little kind of delimiters to write and format the time in the way you want. So we've got capital Y for year, lower M for month, lower D for day. We've got a T because we're using a date time, and Quickbase does need that T in there. It's kind of a split between before this is the date and after it is the time. And then we're just using HMS for hour, minute, and seconds. And in my make request down here, I'm using the exact same expression. If I come down here and I search, you can see there's 2 results because it's the exact same thing. And we're just writing it into field ID 132, which happens to be a date time. So this is very powerful and very configurable. You don't have to do the time zone if you don't want, but you can use both of these expressions together or separate. But I have this in my pipelines notes, like my kind of go-to tricks. And anytime I'm using date time, I will just grab this string, pop it in there, and then format it if I need to. And I have not had to deal with pesky or annoying date time values. All right, let's jump into number 3 here, which is different data types. It's very similar to handling time and date time, or just date data that you're getting. You also probably dealt with text and numeric. And so we'll jump back into our pipeline here, and we'll talk a little bit about this new expression, not new in the world of Quickbase, but just new to this Qrew meeting today, and that's called int. So you may receive a string value from an outside platform in a JSON response, and you need to convert it to a number because your field in Quickbase is numeric. And you can use this little int expression here. If you need it to retain decimals, you could do a pipe float. So it just looked like this, and float means it just hasn't been rounded to the nearest number. Pretty straightforward here, nothing really groundbreaking. It's just another tool in your tool belt of I'm receiving this huge chunk of data. I've got string, I've got numbers, I've got date, I've got emails, whatever it may be. Just know that there are many Jinja filters and expressions that allow you to convert data from one type to another so you're not getting tripped up or hitting your head against the wall when dealing with this stuff. Any questions? Oh, we've got a comment here. Besides time.now, I seem to always have issues with working with date fields and using the filters. I tend to refer to Sharon's data guide a lot. Yes, so Sharon is Quickbase Junkie, and Sharon is amazing, and her resources around pipelines are great for beginners all the way up to advanced as well. And she definitely covers time.now, I think there's time.today. Yeah, so it's really, really helpful because, Quickbase can only accept data formatted a certain way. And when you're dealing with all these different data types, you kind of have to remember how it needs to be formatted in order to be accepted. So any of these little expressions, filters, or quick guides like Sharon has just really remove you having to remember all of this stuff, or if you are tripped up on something, just being able to use that as a reference. All right, let's jump into our third and final one here, which is going to be handling null and blank values. So this is most likely going to be a scenario where you are querying for data in an outside platform, or you're receiving data from an outside platform, and you're getting a large payload, like a JSON response, and it's an array. And if we think of an array, it's going to have multiple chunks of data in it. And some of those chunks of data may have actual values. And you may be expecting there to be a value in every single one of those sets of data. Well, some of them may not have one. Maybe the data is bad in the source. Maybe it's not a required field. Either way, there's many scenarios where you're receiving null and blank values, and Quickbase will be a little temperamental with you, and the pipeline may error if you haven't addressed that, because it is literally a null value. There's nothing there. Sometimes in the pipeline, it'll even say no value, and Quickbase won't accept that. And so a quick way to handle any type of null or blank values is to use the default expression. In this example, we are going to skip the kind of basic create record step, because most likely you will not be using that, and you'll be using a make request where you're uploading a bunch of data. And in my example here, I've got a bunch of projects that I received from an outside source, and one piece of data inside of those projects is the tax amount. Well, not every place has a tax. And so I might be receiving a blank tax value, and I can't just write no value into Quickbase. And so I can use this default expression, and I'm going to put this in the chat. This one specifically with these single quotes is meant to be used for text. So anytime the field that you're getting data from is text and it may have blank values, you'll want to use that default filter. And if you're using numeric, I'll toss it in the chat, but I'll also put it in here and just kind of replace this. And we can remove all this. You can see here, I'm still using the same default expression, but instead of the single quotes, I'm using a 0. And what this is saying is if the value that I get back is blank or it's null, put a 0 in there. Give me a value so that it doesn't fail. And this is really, really helpful because all you have to do is map this once. And if your payload comes back with 3,000 bit sets of data and only one of them is blank, or 2,999 of them are blank, no matter the scenario, this will handle that. So you don't have to comb through the data you received and try and find which one's blank and fix that. You can just put in this default value, this default expression, sorry, and it will go ahead and format it for you so you don't get failed pipelines and combing through data and hours lost of trying to figure stuff out. So this has been a game changer for me over the past couple of years as I've been really deep in pipelines in my role at Quickbase. So that's it. I know we got about a minute left here. If there's any questions or you want me to go back to anything, any comments that you guys have that, you know, in similar situations that you found that works for you, yeah, I would love for you to share the knowledge, and great way for everyone to learn. Oh, you're on mute.
Good stuff. We got 15 seconds left. But you got it. You covered it all this time. So that's great, Daniel. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the Pipeline Qrew Meet. And I'm Kokila Vicheshri, and I'm a solutions architect here at Quickbase. So, today I will be walking you all through two very common but extremely powerful pipeline use cases. So, just have my screen set as well. Okay. So, after each use case, we'll take a couple of minutes for the Q&A, and we'll discuss any questions or comments that you have. So yeah, so let's start with audit logging. So audit logging is something we see in almost every application, whether it's order management, project management, or any operational workflows that we set up in Quickbase. Audit logging is a very standard business requirement. So users might want to track what field change, what's the old value, new value, who modified it, and when it has been modified. So all these in Quickbase we can achieve through creating a pipeline. And traditional approach that we follow is where we create separate pipelines for each field level audit logging. So for example, if you see the screenshot, and I'm using an example of an employees table, and let's say I want to track the audit logging for job title. So whenever the title of an employee is updated, we just need to track that in the audit logs. So the first step on new event, where we have just specified what is the field that, triggers the pipeline, and followed by a create record step, which will be adding an entry into the audit logs table. And here we have just do the field mappings, like the field changes job title, we're just populating the old value, new value, modified by, etc. So this pipeline will be just used to track the audit logging for a single field. So let's say we want to track the logs for 5 fields, then we need to create 5 pipelines. And if we want to do it for 15 or 20 fields, then we need to have that many pipelines created. And yes, this approach works. We will be able to have entries in the audit logs table, but as requirements grow, when there are like more fields that we need to track of, this approach becomes a bit of challenge. Like it creates challenges, as in we need to duplicate the logic, and it'll be like so many pipelines which will be difficult to maintain, and it might even cause potential performance issues. So in those cases, the question is like, what can we do to make this approach more scalable? So the recommended approach that I'm demonstrating today is to use a single pipeline where we can track multiple fields from the same table. So one pipeline, multiple fields. And here is how the design works on a high level. So in the trigger step, we have a on new event. So this is where we will define all the fields for which we need to track the audit logs of. So let's say if you have 10 fields in a table that you want to track the logs, you can define all those 10 fields in the on new event in the same on new event, and followed by a make request step. So this make request step is where we define the logic on how to just create entries into the logs table. So just 2 steps to make this pipeline work. So let's take a look at the pipeline. So I'm switching on to my pipeline screen. So I've used the same example where I have an employees table, and I have defined a few fields for which I need to track the logs of. So I've defined all the fields in this same on new event step, and followed by a make request step. So this is a Quickbase make request, the Quickbase API call to add records into a table, and followed by the body where we are using this A of string. So A is nothing but the step A, which in this case it's on new event. So A of string will actually give us all the fields that we have selected in the previous step. So just to show you an example, this I've just tried printing out what A of string has. So this is what A of string looks like, for the example that I have set up. If you see the column, the lines highlighted in red, those are the fields that I have selected in the first step. So I have selected department. So you have the field name here, colon, followed by the value of the field. Then I have selected job title. So you have the value of the title here, salary, what is the value, status, what is the status, manager name, who is the manager. So every time the pipeline is triggered and the pipeline is running, the step A will be in this specific format, and followed by all the default Quickbase fields, because Quickbase default fields is part of all the pipeline steps. So this is how a sample A of string, like the step A, looks like. So now what we are doing here is we're using Ginger expressions to loop through that A of string and take each field at a time. And then we'll be checking if that field has actually been updated or not. So we have a condition here defined that is to check whether the old and new value is same or not, which is just to make sure that the update has happened. And if it has been updated, then it will just create an entry into the audit log table. So I'm just defining all the fields here to populate the audit log table. So this is within a loop. So it will run, iterate through that A of string and just run for each of the field that we have defined there. And this field is something which will return the field name. So if you want to populate the field name, actual field name to the logs table, you can use this field, and also populating the previous value, the new value, modified by, and the other details as well. So this is how the pipeline looks. So I can run the pipeline. We'll just see how it actually works. The pipeline is on. Let's just, let me just come back to my employees table, and I'll just make some updates. So let's say Michael Johnson, his title is updated. I'm just updating his salary and maybe his manager, Jane Smith. So I've updated few details for Michael Johnson, and the pipeline is on. So when I save the employee details and then I refresh my audit logs table. Okay. So I have 3 entries created in my logs table for Michael Johnson. And the field change, you can see, have 3 entries: job title, capturing the old value, the new value, who modified it, when it has been modified. Same for manager name, salary. So these are the 3 fields that has been updated. So likewise, if you want to include more fields, we have added it to the first, on new event step, it will capture the changes in the logs table. So the main, the best part of this particular step is maybe if tomorrow the business says, okay, we need to add a few more fields to the audit logging. So there's no need to create a separate pipeline in that case. You just need to modify the existing pipeline, and that to just add the steps to the configuration, the on new event. So the Ginger formula is dynamic. So once you add the fields here in this, on new event step, the formula will just work through it and create audit log entries. So it's like more of a scalable approach which is easy to maintain, and it actually is adapt with increasing business needs. So this is about the audit logging use case. So any questions and comments from the team? Have you tried?
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just asking, maybe if you have tried any other approaches, maybe for audit logging, just kind of make it more scalable, if you want to share something.
In chat, Yazan asked, can you go over how you captured who modified the record?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, so I am using this last modified by, which is available in this step. So last modified by. So we have, again, since it's a Quickbase default field, it will be available in all these steps. So I'm just trying to pull out the email from the last modified by and populating it to the audit log table. So yeah, does that answer your question, Jennifer, was it?
No, Yazan.
Oh, okay. I'm not able to see my chat window right now, so yeah.
It's okay.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, then we'll use the rest of the time to go through the second use case. Let me just go back to my slide. Okay. So the second use case, the on-demand and the schedule trigger. So in most of the business processes, sometimes we might need to run the same logic in two different ways, like on demand basis, where user clicks some button and they want to run some logic. And the same logic, sometimes they need to execute on a scheduled basis as well, like a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So for example, if I'm taking this employees table, let's say there's a employee review button at each employee level, and the manager clicks on that button so that some logic needs to be executed in the backend for that employee. And then for few fields like, maybe the review status or the review date, so they need to update some statuses based on the logic that has been executed. So that's like a on-demand trigger, like, when somebody clicks on a button, they need to execute the logic. Now, let's say the same logic business wants to run on a schedule basis, like they want to do the employee review, like for all the employees on a weekly basis. So in that time, we need to replicate the logic, the pipeline logic, but this time it's not trigger, it's something that we need to schedule it. So usually, since the same pipeline cannot be triggered and scheduled, we might end up creating two different pipelines where we'll have like the same logic duplicated. So again, if there are any changes to the logic in future, then we might need to modify both the pipelines, and that will be like difficult to maintain. So the approach that I'm suggesting, again, a simple way to kind of avoid that duplication is where we have the main pipeline, which is a triggered one. So you use a incoming requester webhook channel as the trigger point. And when you add that incoming request webhook as a trigger, and rest of the logic, you can define it in the pipeline. If it's a search, update, or whatever is the, the business logic that needs to be executed, you can define it. And the webhook channel just act as a trigger point. Okay. So this pipeline will be your main triggered pipeline. You can trigger it on a button click. And now to execute the same on a scheduled basis, what we can do is if we create another pipeline and we just add a webhook make request step to call the same, the same webhook URL, which we have used in the trigger. So it's just a simple pipeline. We have only one step, and we can schedule the second pipeline. So in turn, in the backend, it's going to call the primary pipeline that we have. So I'll actually show you the pipeline, how we have created for the example. So it just be easy to kind of visualize. So let's say I have this search update, the business logic defined here. And this incoming request, this webhook is my trigger point. And so when we add this incoming request step, we will be getting this URL. So this is the URL that you need to configure in your button so that when somebody clicks on the button, this pipeline will be triggered. So that's your trigger part. And the rest of the logic, can define it. Now, if you see the second pipeline, the scheduled one, so I'm not defining any logic here. The only step that we can add here is the webhook make request step. Okay. So in this webhook make request, in the URL section, I'm just calling the webhook URL, the one that we saw right here. I'm just calling the same URL in the make request step. And that's it. There are no other details, no body, nothing needs to be passed in this case. And we can just go ahead and schedule this pipeline. So what happens in the backend is when this pipeline is, at the scheduled time, it will start, the pipeline starts its execution, and it just go ahead and invoke the triggered pipeline. And we have all the logic defined here, so it will just start executing accordingly. So we're not duplicating the pipeline. We're just trying to avoid that duplication and trying to centralize the logic in one area, because as the logic or the business requirements change, it will be easy if we have everything in a single single pipeline or single place. So this is a small trick that you can use. And main another kind of like a scenario that we have seen where this has been useful is there have been few customers who have done integration with third-party services. Like they'll be pulling data from third-party services into the Quickbase application, and they have pipelines set up to kind of bring that data, and those pipelines will be like scheduled one. But sometimes they might want to kind of run those pipelines on a trigger base, like when somebody clicks the button as well, they just need to pull in information. So most customers, what they end up doing is we'll just have two separate pipelines, one for the trigger, one for schedule. So all the API calls, everything will be like at two different places. But using this approach, it's kind of like, we can avoid that duplication. We'll have the logic, everything in a single place. So yeah, this is about the second use case. So any questions, comments, team?
In chat, Yazan writes, I remember trying to implement audit logging through pipelines a while back, and I ran into an issue where pipelines would log the record owner, the modified by value at the creation, or the pipeline owner as the person who made the change instead of the actual user who triggered the pipeline. Sounds like an issue with field mapping. What do you think, Kokila?
Yeah, I think so. Yazan, so which, like, have you used the the updated, the last modified by field in the pipeline, or
Do you remember the structure, Yazan? You can describe a little more?
yeah. So Yazan, I think if you see for this example, I have used this last modified by email, like since I to populate that username, and that will actually work. Like it will give you the user email who actually updated the record. So maybe if it was a different mapping that you have used, you can try using this, and yeah, that should work for the use case that you mentioned. Oh, I think we are on time. At least we were able to complete the two use cases, so that's great.
See you guys in the next room.
What I'm demoing today is our new custom action AI step. And the workflow to demo that is processing invoices and extracting the line item data from an invoice and creating child records underneath the record where I upload the file attachment. If we click add an invoice, upload the invoice, and type in some info, and hit save. This pipeline should run. Come back to this example after I explain the setup of the pipeline, but first we'll see it create the child records. There we go. And it created some child records. And we'll go into later what I'm doing up here and how we can get some accurate data down here. But first I want to show you how to get to the step and how to set it up. So custom action is the step name underneath the AI actions channel. And then we will do one more. The first option is going to be whether you want text output or a JSON body as output. What I'm doing here is using the JSON body to send to our upsert API call. So then the next step is to define the structured JSON. So first is going to be 2, and that's our table ID. And then we want an array of data where each item in the array is going to be another object. And then each object has a field ID, let's say 7, and a value, which is going to be like our line number. And then we can add another field ID to be our quantity. We can add another, oh, that's at the wrong level. Wait, no, it wasn't. I think I did this wrong. So we have, this should be an object. Basically want to set this up to be the schema for your JSON. And you can come here to ensure that it looks correct if you're more familiar with like the text version of it, of a JSON schema. I found it easier to work with this because I had, when they originally introduced this channel, this was all I had, and I had to learn how to build this part. The next part of the channel is writing the prompt though. So like any other large language model, like ChatGPT, this is where you input your prompt. And then next is some additional context. So if you had like a search step or a look up a record step or anything like that, you could include those field values and that output from those steps in this step selection. So you could include a comma separated list of all the steps you want included. And then the file URL, it's going to be the file transfer handle. And I'm giving everyone a free quiz question. So these are the file types that are supported. PDF, CSV, Word doc, Excel, text, and then image formats like PNG or JPEG. And then the last thing that you can input is a persona. So, you know, what is their job or what's their role? And we can go over to the actual pipeline that I'm running to see what I input. So this is the JSON structure. It looks similar to what I was inputting before, where we have the field ID value and then a description under the value for what needs to be input. And then I have the prompt. This is where you're probably going to do a lot of playing around with what gets the best output. So what gets you the data that you need for it to be included. And then also what I was having trouble with, and actually Nicole on our last call had some very good prompt changes to exclude some data that I was not wanting that kept showing up. Step selection, I'm not getting any additional context. This is the invoice file transfer handle that we want to be using from our record that we're creating. And then this is the persona. It's a data entry worker, and it's entering data for invoices. And so now we can kind of go back to this demo and explain what we have going on up here, where we can see the invoice amount that I entered. From here, doesn't match, and that's because it's missing the sales tax and the shipping and handling. It's consistently missing that. So if I enter in those amounts, 18,770, the sales tax, and 7,000 for the shipping, you can see that they match, and that my formula for flagging it to check the data, which is just a 5% threshold, or you could have matching it to the whole dollar, becomes unchecked because the summarized data matches the manually input data. And that's just one trick that I'm using to have some oversight in the AI data output, because I don't think anybody should trust the AI output because of things like hallucinations. So another thing that somebody mentioned that I thought was a good idea was counting the number of line items. And so if we had something like a place to enter a number of line items up here, and we could compare that against a different summary field, and then we'd have two different checks just to ensure that our data is even a little bit better. So now I'm going to use Nicole's prompt changes that she advised me to use. So the line item doesn't account for sales tax, then we'll please include it, and then we'll skip any line items that equal the invoice amount. And so I'll turn that pipeline on and turn this one off, and we'll just try the same exact invoice, and we'll see how it does. During our last session, it was actually working for this main invoice that I'm working with. And one other thing that I wanted to point out before we just jump into demos and Q&A is the output. Whenever I work with pipeline activity, this is another kind of bonus tip, is, or any new pipeline channel, I always look at the activity. So I'll run like a dummy step, and then I'll look at the attributes of the output, because that tells me what I can use later on in my pipeline. So this output text is what I'm providing directly to the API call, b.output text. And the structured AI format is something that I could interact with Jinja. So if I wanted to do like a for loop on the data array, I could do that. If I needed to do some sort of character count for validation or something like that, these are the tokens. So the number of characters that were processed. So then we'll refresh this and see how it did with Nicole's prompt. And it actually hit it exactly. And we can see down here that it included sales tax and shipping and handling. And so if we and go line by line. I think it looks pretty good. Zoom out a little bit here and here, so we can get that full picture. So we can see that it's doing pretty good. It even got the country of origin and the color on each of these. And so now the last thing that I wanted to demo was that I didn't need to, oops, go back. I didn't need to train on this specific invoice format, and it was able to process completely different invoice formats without any, pre-training or context. So I have a couple other examples that we can test with. So we'll try this one. And this was also something I said last session, or during the last breakout group, was this would be a good use case for our file attachment plugin. Just chuck them all in there, but I didn't set it up that way for the demo, unfortunately. I'll create a few different records, and by the time I do my third one, we can go back to the original. And if anybody has any questions at any moment, we can certainly take those.
Did you want to just share the tip that Nicole shared with you, just so that
Yeah.
you can talk a little bit about what was not happening the first couple times,
So,
and then
yeah.
what she recommended that was the breakthrough?
So, yeah, we can, let's do that. So with this, I had 3 different pipelines set up. So this was how it was set up originally in the or similar prompt to the original one. And I was telling it to ignore like the total line and ignore other lines that it was grabbing. And she advised to use the word skip line items that are equal to the invoice amount. And she also the broader tip behind that change was to treat AI like a 6-year-old and use very straightforward language with it and very direct commands. So I think even refining this further, I think if I had more time to play around with it, I might get rid of all of this information because it's already in my output, and then condense this and make it as concise as possible with very weird commands on what to pick up and what to ignore. But yeah, before we were seeing the subtotal and the overall total showing up as line items themselves, so we were getting inflated numbers in the summarize amount. I don't think this has a summary down here, but you're getting some. We're off by a little bit, unless I did my summary wrong before. So we'll skip this one. This is one that you might want to check manually and go through all the line items. I think this one, last time I thought this one worked. Maybe I used a different invoice. We can actually check here though. Oh, actually, no, the quantities look great. I think these are all our quantities here. Like I said, I don't think we would ever go to I would ever suggest implementing a 100% automated process, but some things that I mentioned in previous sessions were maybe adding like a review status. So you could have somebody upload these, or maybe some automatic upload process. Maybe your customers send their invoices to an inbox, and that uploads them to Quickbase. And then you have a team that just reviews these, and instead of having to manually enter the data, all they have to do is open this in a separate tab, the PDF, the document in another tab, and review and edit line items here and there, and then update the status once it's 100% reconciled. We can try rerunning this one because I think that was the other one that worked. Sometimes you'll have, I've seen where the same input gets different outputs. Yeah, somebody in the last session was mentioning as like a receipt uploader, Dwight, as a use case, or like travel expenses and other business expenses. Okay, so I think I got it to match there, and yeah, I don't know. I just changed the customer name, but it's not even getting that context. So that's kind of an example of how it's getting different reports or different outputs here. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is, I think I mentioned it, but someone was asking about very large documents with like 10,000 lines, and I just flagged the 2 MB limit. So if you do currently have some sort of OCR process that you're already processing documents with, then you're probably not going to switch from that to this if you're using very large documents.
So the breakout room is going to end in about a minute, so folks can head back to the main room and leave the breakout room whenever you'd like.
Thanks, everyone.
See you there.